Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone. And now, here is your host, the lovely, delightful, insightful, and all-around great gal, Ms. Barbara DeLong.
Welcome to Nightlight, everybody. I have today a really fascinating guest that I'm very excited to share with you. His name is Philip Comella, and he's a lawyer with a philosophy degree whose mission in life is to expose the fallacies in our current materialistic worldview and to advance a more promising and rational outlook. He's the host of the popular radio show Conversations Beyond Science and Religion. It's a podcast at www.webtalkradio.net. And his book, The Collapse of Materialism, Visions of Science, Dreams of God, is a culmination of decades of work committed to developing a new and credible scientific paradigm to unify the physical world of science and the metaphysics of religion. The book is amazing. I highly, highly recommend it. You can find him at www.thecollapseofmaterialism.com. And it's a book that I think everybody should read. It is educational for sure, and it does put a lot of things into question that it's important that we be questioning at this point in time in our lives. There's a lot of stuff going on many levels, consciousness-wise and scientific-wise, and it's time we started to question, to look at all of these different directions, and to make some reasonable, intelligent choices. So welcome to the show, Philip. I'm glad you're here.
Thanks a lot for having me, Barbara. I'm looking forward to this.
I am too. It's really, your book was an amazing adventure for me because you went into a lot of the scientific stuff that I've read about, that I was, of course, taught in school, and then you turn around and you really kind of destroy all of my belief systems because you prove most of them couldn't possibly have happened, which is the coolest thing ever, because I am definitely very metaphysically oriented and spiritually and consciously, and I'm totally, I call it, I tell people, I don't even tell people, they ask me what I am, and I basically tell them I'm a student of the cosmos. I absolutely believe there is a unifying total source of creation, and that consciously we are all connected to it, and that's kind of where your book goes. And I know this book took you decades to write. Have to ask, why this book and why now?
Well, I think that fundamentally we have to do a better job of reconciling the scientific worldview and the spiritual worldview. And that task has really, it hasn't been accomplished yet. It's underway. But when you think about it, we really have two separate ways of looking at the world. We have the hardcore materialistic science viewpoint, the Big Bang theory and all of its attributes. And then we have this growing worldview of spirituality or new spirituality or consciousness is called. It goes by different names. And I fundamentally think that there is only one worldview and that these two separate worldviews, commonly called science and religion, need to be united. Because I think at the core, we are united. We share attributes of both worldviews. And when we keep them separated, we don't do justice to either one of them.
Oh, I agree with you. And
now's the time to do it.
It's. I know that there is a new movement, a new comfort level among most people with talking about spiritual stuff and consciousness stuff. I taught school for 25 years, and when I started teaching, if they had known I was into any of this stuff, I literally would have lost my job. There was something in the contract that addressed issues that went beyond the normal paradigms. And so, they're not burning us at the stake any longer. And it does feel as though people are more and more open to the fact that there is far more than science has taught us. And still today, the kids in school are being taught the Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, and there's a lot of problems here. Among them being that the Big Bang worldview it's so powerful that it forecloses rational discussion of other perspectives, and this is despite the fact that for example, the founder of modern science, Isaac Newton, was really a mystic to begin with. Then the founders of quantum theory, such as Schrödinger and Max Planck and even Einstein, they were very much mystics. They realized that in the case of quantum theory, that there were strong suggestions that at the root of reality is a mind, not a particle. Max Planck has a famous quote, which I will paraphrase, something like, "Mind is the matrix of all reality." Now, the guy who said this is not some New Age mystic. He was the founder of quantum theory. And so we forget sometimes that the people that have thought most deeply about these topics, the topics that lie at the root of science, they themselves saw a greater role of mind in the world. They saw the truth, a deeper truth of spirituality, and they realized that the world went beyond these particles. Now, I could spend a lot of time with the Big Bang. I won't unless you want me to. But the point is that I think that we are rising to this, we could call it a level of consciousness, of maturity, confidence, where some of these topics, many of which you address on your show, are gaining greater credibility in the mainstream, right?
Well, if you look at Niels Bohr, the guy that he often spoke of the fact that he through an inspirational dream he got the concept of the atom, and
right.
Einstein, his theory of relativity came from a lucid dream. So they were very comfortable with utilizing those techniques and those aspects of life without putting a title on them that labeled them in that woo-woo aspect or area of life.
Right.
But
go ahead.
But it's to me it's I don't see a problem with combining the two aspects, the two areas, because in my mind they really do flow together beautifully. But without go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think that ultimately the problem is one of dualism. It's that age-old question of how can mind affect matter? What is the source of the of the paranormal, parapsychology? What is the source of the placebo effect? Is astrology real? Precognitive dreams, near-death experiences. All these strange things sort of assume a connection between mind and matter. And the most obvious example of that is psychokinesis, mind over matter, or the placebo effect, which I call mind over body. And so ultimately, if you're a materialist, one of the hallmarks of materialism is that that the world of matter is independent of mind, and that there is no connection. There is a very famous quote, which I have in my book. I don't know if it's famous, but I use it a lot. It's from Steven Weinberg's book, Dreams of a Final Theory. And Steven Weinberg won the Nobel Prize for the electroweak theory back in the 80s. In any event, he has this chapter where he questions the paranormal, and he basically says, well, how can you possibly believe in mind over matter, because we cannot measure a particle going from the mind to the external object. And so this to me really puts it clearly, succinctly. We don't have, under the materialistic framework, there is no connection between mind and matter. And so it's all a mystery, and that's why if you read the leading scientist books such as Stephen Hawking, Lawrence Krauss, Lisa Randall, they will all disparage parapsychology, the paranormal, all these strange events, because they cannot explain them in a materialistic framework. So what I'm saying is that there has to be a connection, because we know that these things are true. Not all of them are true, but enough of them are true that we should be looking for a theory within the scientific mindset to explain them, as opposed to reject them out of hand.
And well, with science, they always come to a point where they don't have an answer, and they refuse to step step over that line, and go into there must have been intelligent thought behind this, and it just the fact that we're in my belief system, and it gets refined from day to day, but basically there was a cosmic consciousness that pulled us into creation and gave that consciousness that was etheric a physical reality to experience things in. And there are certain things that you really have to be in the physical to experience, that you can't, if you have no body, if you have no form, if you have no shape, that you can't experience it. So that a physicality was required, and therefore we became the physical reality to be the expression of that consciousness.
Yeah, that's very similar to where I'm at. That's very, very similar. And I think that what is important here is that using the tools of science, for example, the scientific method, where you formulate an hypothesis and then you test it. The Big Bang is really an hypothesis. It's an educated guess about the creation of the world. And then scientists sort of play out the repercussions or the consequences of that theory. What I'm saying is, as an hypothesis, instead of assuming that the world began with an explosion of matter, of impersonal, random matter and energy, assume that the world began with a mind, or you could call it a consciousness, or you could call it spirit, or you could call it energy. The term itself doesn't make that much difference. But my point is that if you assume that the world began with a mind that projected the world out of a dreaming power or out of a 3D projection power, whatever you want to call it, then you could play out that hypothesis and see if you could explain more. And my point is that when you begin the explanation with the hypothesis of a mind coming first, as opposed to the Big Bang, you could explain everything. As opposed to the Big Bang, which to me is riddled with assumptions, and frankly, they have confused the how with the why. They want to explain how things happen like a machine, but they cannot explain why. Why is there a world? And here's a how. How did something come from nothing? Why is there order in the world? Why is there consciousness? It's a very, very troubling outlook, and I think that if nothing else, what I hope is that with this rise in consciousness, whatever we're calling it, this greater inner spirituality, this sense of self-doubt, this mind-opening sort of era that we're in, sort of subtly, that will rise to the realization that we could question science and the world does not go away. We have the same world. We have the same world, but now we have a better attitude. That's
well, when you look at these assumptions or these theories, they are basically an idea. And an idea is something that can't be proven, that is thought, and thought comes from the mind, and the mind goes to the consciousness. So in essence, even their assumptions have a spiritual base to them.
Right, yes. I think it's also, I mean, there's a number of books, and if I had to do a course on this in my curriculum, one of the books would be, it's called The Trouble with Physics, and it's by Lee Smolin. It's a really well-written educational book. It's really about string theory, but it's about how science and the major universities are rejecting any student that wants to study something other than string theory, because it's the wave, it's the theory of the day, it's the popular mindset. And the point is that science right now is rejecting sort of contrary ideas when they know that all ideas begin in the mind, and therefore the quest of science should be to test that theory against experience, not against preordained assumptions of what experience is supposed to be. So frankly, I read a lot on this, not only on the substance but also on changing minds. And there's something about that is sort of inspiring to me, which is along the lines of when the evidence builds up so high, so strong that you can't deny it, then something changes. And I just think we need to get going.
But when you go through history and stuff, inspiration has been something that has triggered every movement that's out there. It's those aha moments that suddenly open up a whole new level of understanding and insight and wisdom and all of the above, and it applies to life. And the more I look at people becoming more and more aware, more open to new thoughts and new ways of perceiving. I tell everybody all the time, you create your reality by your perception of it, which is basically what you're saying too. And I think we're talking the same language, a little different semantically, but I do feel that there's a great synchronicity here. And it is a matter of our minds, our spirits are very powerful. And as we change our perception, we literally do change our reality. You talk about the dream world view, and I believe that's exactly what I'm talking about. You want to?
Yeah. I think that I spent a lot of time on trying to express this new approach in rational, scientific terms. I'm a lawyer by practice. I have a philosophy degree. I believe that I am rooted in rationality. I'm not one for high flights of fancy. But when you come out and you say that we are living in the dream of God, which is really what my position is, it may sound a little odd to some, but one of the things to keep in mind, and we just got done talking about the Big Bang. I have a blog that is not quite done. It's along the lines of probability theory, and if you consider what evidence we have that something came from nothing in the Big Bang, and it's not just any old something. It's enough something to fill up the entire universe with 100 billion galaxies, each having 100 billion stars. Where all that stuff came from, there is no explanation for that. But when you consider, do we have any evidence that the mind is capable of projecting a real seeming world from nothing? The answer is absolutely, and the answer is hallucinations or lucid dreaming. We all dream every night, and there are stories, and you've probably read them, but there's historically there are amazing accounts of real seeming hallucinations. There's a book called Hallucinations by Oliver Sacks, which I would recommend, where he goes through people with serious mental illnesses that just imagine real worlds out of their own mind. And so I'm saying, okay, so in terms of probability, to me, the probability that something came from nothing, or that matter came from nothing without the mind, is so infinitesimally small that it'd be hard even to put a number on it. But the odds that the mind is capable of projecting a real seeming world is 1 in 1. We know it's possible. And so this is where I begin really the analysis. If we know it's possible for the mind to project the world, and I think that ultimately we want more than a flimsy dream world. We're not happy with it. We want a hard world, a world that we live in now. Well, guess what? That's exactly what we have. The mind of God has delivered to us the world we desired. And that's where you get a little spiritual, a little religious. And to me, we just haven't appreciated the miracle of the world. We live in a constant state of ungratitude. We don't appreciate. We do not. Why? And the number one reason is where we are still growing as human beings. Number two, modern science teaches that this is just a random creation, just one of those things that happen from time to time. So what? We have a amazing, miraculous world, but this thing just happened to pop out of nothing. Carry on your day. That is really.
Doesn't science put us in a prison, though? Doesn't science say if we can't prove it, it's not real? And there are things in this world that while you can scientifically coldly analyze them, but the reality that the feeling of beauty and wonder and magic is something that you can't quantify, you can't prove, but it exists. They can't prove joy, but people experience it all the time. They can't prove sadness or sorrow, but I mean, it can be physically diagnosed, but there's an element missing. It's sort of like, you can create artificial life, but there's no spirit to it. And I think that we are getting to a point where people understand that there is a spirit, and that spirit is amazing, and that spirit can do miracles. I mean, miracles do happen; they do exist, and science can't prove it, and they just say, "Well, it's an anomaly." But no, it's not. It's real, and so. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that the great irony of this is that we're living in the greatest imaginable miracle. in my opinion, and that's the universe, the world. We're living in a miracle. So to say, I mean, I think it's sort of a short-sighted kind of perspective to say that, okay, science does not believe in miracles. Science does not believe that that Joe Smith had a precognitive dream that his brother died in an auto crash, or does not believe that Edmund Alexander, the author of Proof of Heaven, actually had a near-death experience. That these are all miracles and they don't exist. Well, that's great, but what about the universe we live in? We are living in a miracle, so smaller miracles are not that much harder to explain. That's ultimately my position on miracles. I don't think that everything that is written in all the books on New Age or parapsychology or miracles, biblical and religious, I don't think they all occurred. I'm not like a literalist, but it's a lot more healthy to read these things and ask yourself, well, is there a germ of truth here? And if so, what does it mean for our world? I think that's much more. And Barbara, I think that's what you do. I mean, I've listened to some of your shows and read some of the material. I mean, it's so much more rewarding to say, well, maybe it's possible that this gentleman did have his cancer cured because the doctor showed him love, or that that there was a synchronicity where a song comes on a radio that you were just thinking about, or whatever. I mean, it's so much. It gives life so much more value and richness to say to yourself, maybe we do live in an enchanted world where these things happen, and maybe, and this is my position, maybe they don't happen all the time, because we want some regularity in our world. We are really ordered creatures. We don't want to live in some dizzying, nightmarish world where nothing can be certain, nothing is guaranteed. So the miracle thing really gets me going.
Well, let's call it a synchronicity then, because synchronicities do exist. I mean, frankly, it would be a miracle if I could balance my checkbook. So, I mean,
I'm with you. I never.
But the power that we have within ourselves is so massive, and acknowledging it makes it possible for us to utilize it, and so many people don't trust that, and it's very sad, because we do have the ability to control so much within our reality. And having said that, it feels to me, I think that we are so conditioned by science, by corporations, by parents, by teachers. We're so conditioned that we cannot do things, that things are not possible, that we don't even say why not, we tend to accept it and go on. I feel personally that the human spirit, the human condition, the human person has been imprisoned by society to not think. And what I'm seeing now over the last maybe decade, people starting to think. And instead of people, I'm finding people coming to me and saying, how do I tap into that energy? How do I utilize that energy within myself, instead of saying, can you make this happen for me? It's more of a, how do I make this happen for myself? So people are waking up to the fact that the potential is there. They just don't know quite how to grab onto it yet.
Well, I think you're exactly right, and I think this word imprisoned is the correct perspective, and a good description of where materialism leads us, because it could be explained very easily by just carrying out its assumption that there is a world of matter external to us, such as our human body, or Mother Nature, and it operates on its own power and does not care about human beings. There's no meaning or purpose in the materialistic worldview. So we are imprisoned by this thought, and you hit the nail on the head, and I completely agree with it, that it is a thought. It's like saying to yourself, I can't. And how many people were raised with a little engine that could? We're supposed to be positive people. We're supposed to be unlimited in our aspirations. We're supposed to be big dreamers. And frankly, I don't even care whether the Big Bang is true or not. I'm still going to be optimistic. I'm still going to be positive. I'm still going to be. I told my daughter that the key is to be in a constant state of overcoming. If we tear down the idea that we live in this materialistic world, the world of the Big Bang, the world of the I can't. If it's true that we do write our own story, that dreams can become true, then our future is unlimited, and that's where things get really exciting. And that's where I'm at. I'm thinking I don't really care whether 3 people read my book, because I do care, but the point is that I am the voice of this type of optimism. That is my function. I am the voice of idealism. I am the one that is either bold or dumb enough to pronounce that we do live in a big dream, but the key is we have to sort of grasp the source of the dream. We have to change the mindset of science, so we're no longer looking at the world as a independent, impersonal object. We're looking at it as a creation of the united mind, united consciousness, and therefore we need to direct it to a more pleasant place. And that's the kingdom of heaven, in my little opinion there. So it's a beautiful. So I think so. I'm the one that's going off on a limb with these ideas because someone's got to do it, and there's other people similar. I might be the farthest out on a limb, though, if you look around. But
well, I think in some aspects you are, but I think you were following along with Pierre de Chardin's. We're not humans having a spiritual experience, we're spirits having a human experience. And
right.
I think if people could grasp that and understand that this is a level of consciousness that we will eventually evolve beyond. But the thoughts that there was a universal consciousness and that we come into human bodies to, the body is something that allows our spirit to experience a physical reality, goes very much along with the Thoth material, with a lot of other material that's been out there for generations and people haven't paid
right.
attention to it. And I think what excites me so much is that we're at a time where we're not going to be burned at the stake, that you can put the philosophy out there, and it's sort of like casting seeds out there, and that some of them will take root, some of them will grow, some of them will create amazing things, and for others it's not the time. And I have found that the right people find me and listen to me. The right people will find you and listen to you. Your book 30 years ago wouldn't have gone very far. But today it does. I mean, I even loved what you did with Darwin. I loved how you explained, Darwin's work and the fact that, there are jumps there that couldn't possibly happen. And you did say one thing in the book that blew me away. It basically is, how do you explain the evolution of the eye? And that set me back. It's like, okay, so if we're evolving, if we're growing and whatever, how did we go from being blind to having sight? How could that possibly have happened? And it couldn't have been random. It had to be arranged. And, I did a lot of pondering on that point.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's. I mean, there are so many. There are so many good examples. As you were talking there, and I have my own show, Conversations Beyond Science and Religion. I'm only doing about one or two a month now, but I've had so many people on the show, and I get into this topic a lot, which is when is this transformation going to occur? When are we going to be in a new worldview? And it's funny, everyone has got a similar prediction, which is like 20, 30 years is what I hear. But then also everyone's got a different approach to getting there. Mm-hmm. Is it going to be toppling over the leading scientists? Is it going to be a world-changing event, like a biblical type of event? Is it going to be just grassroots? People reading, listening to your show, reading my book, reading your material, reading Rupert Sheldrake and Dean Radin and all these guys, and come and thinking for themselves where there's class materialistic science and the Big Bang, but people stop going to the classes, where you have, and so I'm of the mind right now that it's got to be a combination of everything. We're all like little soldiers using our own little skills, and we're trying to, what ultimately am I trying to do? I'm trying to point us towards a better world. It's that simple. It's not anything fancy. I just think there's more to the human being than we have been taught. And one reason why I am so emphatic and so focused on the scientific worldview is that I simply imagine what would the world look like if instead of us teaching the Big Bang, the inflationary universe, dark matter, dark energy, the God particle, all these weird theories of science, we instead at least had a comparative course, which is, okay, here's an alternative view of how we wound up where we are at. And you could compare it to the scientific worldview, so at least if we start teaching people that this is credible, we start giving them a choice, then I think that sets the groundwork for a more dramatic change of our mindset.
Well, my argument, coming from a school teacher's point of view, I taught special ed for 25 years, and it was, ABCs to algebra and everything in between. So it went in lots of different directions, and I always gave kids lots of different options, two possibilities, and pick which one works for you and embrace it. And I wish that school were like that. I wish that people could be given, the bare bones. This is what so-and-so thinks. This is what so-and-so thinks. This is what they have proved. Some of the stories of what scientists went through in order to get to where they are now is fascinating. And what they got, accurate, but it wasn't the whole story. It's like trying to build a bridge without supports. Everybody adds another support, and having a more spiritual outlook on the evolution of everything gives you a better, a steadier or more stable bridge to walk across to get to that higher consciousness. Science is important, but if you look at it all, we've come a long way in the last 100 years for sure. But I truly do not believe that we are going to, in metal containers, send people into space like Star Trek. That's not going to happen. If we explore any place else, it's going to be interdimensional travel. It's not going to be in tin cans. It's just not. And for anybody to think that is possible blows me away.
Yeah, I want to comment upon, I think, the use of the word science, and then I'm going to talk about the projectile there for a second. But
okay.
it is, science itself. I have no problem with the scientific method, and I have no problem with the term science, which means, I think, body of knowledge or to know. And the problem is that we, in our society, we have made materialistic or Big Bang science synonymous with science. If you look at one of the fundamental precepts of science as a field of thought, the idea is to make as few assumptions as possible. It is to explain phenomena with a theory. It's to propose educated guesses and to test those guesses against experience. And so my opinion is that science is not practicing science anymore because they are, A, they make too many assumptions, B, they are rejecting physical phenomena, such as anything in the parapsychology, supernatural realm. That's not science. That is a system of belief. And there are a number of commentators, and I'm one of them, and I have all sorts of things in preparation that really say that modern science is really a form of religion because they have these beliefs that they will not give up on. And if it comes from Einstein, if it comes from Hawking, if it comes from Lawrence Krauss or Sean Carroll, Lisa Randall, it is gospel truth, and it cannot be questioned. And I think that is not science. That is advancing a system of belief, and that's really a lot of what my book is about. That when you apply a logical analysis to science, it doesn't do much better than religion in terms of surviving. The other point, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go with the projectile.
No, I was just going to say that the issue, and I tend to forget, that if you accept the materialistic paradigm, the closest star is 4.2 light years away, which is something like about 10 trillion miles. And the fastest rocket is something like 30,000 miles an hour. So it will never get there in any amount of time. It will. There's not the energy, the time. It's just, so to visit other worlds is really science fiction. Leaving aside Mars, which is different, but we tend to. So you can't have it both ways. If you're going to take the scientific approach and accept that the nearest star system other than the sun is over 4 light years away, then we're never going to interact with those aliens. But if we do interact with quote unquote aliens or people from other worlds, it will be through another dimension, another layer of the dream or consciousness or something. And there's a book called The Supernatural, which I think I just finished. It's about it really associates aliens with biblical visions. It's a very interesting approach to the whole issue. But anyways, that's my two cents.
I totally agree with you. To me, assuming there is a universal consciousness, which I really believe, that created everything, that would mean it created the aliens too. And that's just another part of this consciousness. But to go back to what you were saying, it makes no sense to try to leave the earth when we don't have peace here. If we can't take care of our own world, why would we want to contaminate other worlds?
Right.
And I really don't think that we will be enabled to make that shift, that move, that reach until we have realized that we are all one family and that we should function as one. And that doesn't mean, I have relatives that I don't like. I mean, but they're still relatives. And I think that people are so caught up in their own personal little worlds, they don't understand that they're a part of everybody else's as well. And you do talk about the fact that we are linked consciously, and we are. There is a group consciousness here. There's a cosmic consciousness, and in order to stretch and combine and link to that, we have to understand ourselves better than we do now. And it's in learning how we control our own environment within ourselves, and then link to others, that we make those steps. And I don't know how long it's going to take. I would love to think it would be real close. Billy Meyer thinks it's 800 years. I don't agree with him on that, but I see it happening. I see it beginning to happen, and it is so cool to see people questioning, and I think that's something that we do not teach in school. We don't teach children to think anymore. We teach them to repeat from rote memory, and they're not thinking anymore, and that frightens me terribly.
Right, and as you know, if since you were gracious enough to read my book, I think it starts with the questioning process. I mean, anything along in this field, you have to have the courage to question, to raise your hand in class, to ask the question, to doubt. Without that, you go nowhere. And I really agree that with the sort of pervasiveness of technology and the find an answer to everything on Google, it has short-circuited the independent thought process. But of course, there's still hope, because on the other side of things, the openness of the internet has exposed the world's people to other ideas. I think that's one thing we're seeing in the Muslim or more closed societies, which I'm not an expert on, but there are certain advantages to the openness of the internet, despite the fact that it's sort of there's a ready-made answer for everything. I want to address something that is, I think, extremely important, because I forget who said it. You may know, but somebody said, it could have been Einstein or Bohr, one of those guys, who said that all learning is remembering. And we sit here, and I'm sitting here. We're talking about the cosmic consciousness of being the root of existence. Well, there's probably no idea that's older in human history. When you go to Hinduism and the Vedas, that's what those books are about. It's about there being the one mind being the source of everything. It was written in poetic language. There was not a lot of concrete images in there, but that is what that book is about. And we tend to forget that the earliest societies, and including some existing societies, such as the Aborigines in Australia, the American Indians, they still believe in this cosmic mind as being the source of reality. So we have sort of gone on this big old detour, starting with Isaac Newton, who said a mystic, who projected this world of matter in order to do his calculations. And then we took this projected material world as a scientific truth. That's really what's happened. And so now we're going through this cycle, I think, where we're starting to dismantle this mechanical world, which, of course, was dismantled about a century ago with quantum theory, but it's still sitting there. And so that's really, so we are going back, I think, to the source, which is the cosmic consciousness. And it's sort of, I think you said that, but that's sort of that's the way I look at it. That big circle.
Well, the pendulum swings both ways, and you get extremes on one end and then extremes on the other hand. I mean, you go back 2,500 years to Plato and Socrates, and they were questioning everything.
Right.
And they had theories, and they were heavy duty, and of course one of them had to drink poison because of it, but we won't go there.
Right.
But it's so important. I have grandchildren, and I look at them memorizing facts and spitting them back and not questioning. And I just it's sad because we aren't using our minds anymore. That ad on television about you know uh this is your brain and this is your brain on drugs and a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Well, most
Right.
people today are not using their minds. I would say
Right.
90% of the people I talk to, if I say, what have you learned new this year? They'll say, what do you mean? I'm out of school. I don't have to learn anymore. And it kills me. Your book was an
Yeah.
education for me. I'm 74 years old. I learn something new every day. Now, it's not always something that's worthwhile, but I do learn something. And your
Right.
book was worthwhile. I just want to make sure I don't
No, I appreciate
you know but the element of learning and growing is so important. And people think once they're out of college or graduate school. I mean, I've got 2 masters, but it's kind of like if you don't keep learning, you don't keep growing. And if you don't keep growing, there's no point.
Yeah.
And
No, that's
so many.
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to. I completely agree with that. And the at the end of the day, it's up to everybody to make their own decisions. And the this whole adage about you create your own world. Well, when you don't question and you accept other people's belief systems, to me, you have forfeited your soul. You have forfeited your right to choose and your freedom. Now, I would take a little different. I think one little different perspective I would take is that if you look at the sort of the popularity of organized religion over time, you see, I think that the statistics show that organized religion or orthodox is going down, and this new spirituality is going up. There's more people who say, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, which has the hallmark of being more independent. And I think ultimately, that is a good thing. I personally struggle with the selling feature of this new approach. How do I best sell it? I mean, for example, I struggle with this problem, that if somebody came out with a pill that said this pill is going to make you a better person, make you look younger longer, and help you live longer, and it was approved by the FDA, it would be the most popular pill ever devised. It would make the inventors billionaires if it actually worked. Well, if somebody came out with a book or series of books or a class that said, if you go through this class, you will be happier, you will look younger longer, and you will live longer, then shouldn't that class, those books, also be popular? And this is what I'm struggling with, because I really think that this new age that I am about, I do think we will see real physical improvement in our world. Now, whether I'm positive that people will live longer, I'm positive people will be happier. This whole thing about staying younger longer is more of a dream than a prediction.
Well,
but we all hope that, right? I mean, we all hope that. I mean, right now, I mean, I'm, I'd like to think that I froze at about 43 years old. It's probably not true, but you could always dream, and this is what I mean about an unlimited, uninhibited dream. I mean, reach for the stars. At the worst, maybe you'll hit the moon. This is sort of where I'm at with it. So I am really, I have sort of dedicated myself to walking the walk and talking the talk on that. So,
well, you've really kind of answered your own question, I think. I truly believe that these people that say, "Oh, I'm not religious. I'm a spiritual person." When they say that, I always say to them, "What does that mean?" And it's, well, I think spiritually and yada yada yada, and it's like, well, so you have a philosophy in your head, but what does that mean? You're a spiritual person, and it comes down to I wrote something a long time ago. It was called "You Can Be Either a Parrot or a Prophet," and it basically it's if you're going to memorize something and spout it back at somebody, you're a parrot. If you take a philosophy or a scientific whatever, or anything, and you absorb it into the essence of your being, and you add your own flavor to it, and then you live it and you manifest it within your reality, you become the prophet. And I think that's what's happening today. They've got the theories, but they're not living them. You're walking your talk. And I'm walking my talk. And I believe that I live longer because I enjoy in the expression of the philosophy. If you just have the philosophy, if you talk about it and everything, that's one thing. That's great. But unless you are manifesting it and living it, you are not it.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. And a lot of this is sort of like we could compare it to learning to play the piano or walking or being a public speaker. The more you do it, the more confidence you gain. Mm-hmm. And one thing I have seen with myself, I mean, the outline of my book was a college paper many moons ago, many decades ago. And I have found that the more time goes on, the better I understand it, and the more truthful it seems to me. And so I feel as if by staying on course, I am gaining confidence, a deeper adherence to these basic principles, which is that we do create our own world, but we create it in unison with everybody else. We have to unite the mind in order to benefit from the power of the mind. This is one of the big problems, Barbara, that I think I see in the New Age movement. It's sort of like I don't think you could create your own world individually. I think that you could do it a little bit. It does help, and I think everybody should strive for that. But for global improvement, such as dealing with the homeless problem or the hunger problem, then that takes a consensus. It takes a critical mass, and this is where I think it's in this book, or it could be somewhere else, where the goal is to combine in physical form, in other words, our bodies, that which is combined spiritually. So I think our goal, and you sort of said this in the top of the show at the beginning, our goal as humans is to relive power of the mind, or to put the power of the one mind into physical form, and therefore control or direct our future. There are some studies done. Again, one of the great books that I would recommend is called The Conscious Universe by Dean Radin, where he talks about these studies that were done to these random number generators during world-changing events, Academy Awards, Super Bowl, that they actually registered more order during these global events, as if there was this positive consciousness sort of being measured on these instruments. It's a fascinating little, I think I put it in my book, it's a fascinating little experiment showing that there is something to this global mind, and it's going to take us a long time to get there. But once we reach that tipping point where science says, hey, we could still be scientists, we could still be logical, methodical, and go this route, and let's go this direction instead of giving ourselves up to the prison of the Big Bang. And then we're going to see real change. So.
Mm-hmm. No, that's true. And if you look at it spiritually, scientists wouldn't have evolved if they weren't important. So you can't discount either side. They have to be able to work in unison. And I do believe what we're seeing is people becoming more and more comfortable with combining the two. And it's always true that the sum of the parts is greater than the two individuals. So that combining the spiritual and the science in a good way will enable us to take care of the hungry, take care of the homeless, and I have often. I do predictions for every year and stuff like that. And I keep seeing the breakdown of the large corporations, the large foundations, and us coming together in smaller groups, being able to take care of each other in a better way. I am overwhelmingly sad that children in this country are going to bed hungry. That is totally unacceptable as far as I'm concerned, or that there are homeless people. I just, we've got such large corporations, the government, the religions, big pharma. We've got huge corporations that are bent on taking care of themselves and not the people. And it's time that the people got taken care of. And we gave them the power. I mean, it's not like they grabbed it. We gave it to them.
Well, there are so many problems there, and it really is. I mean, it's remarkable to me when the tendency for certain folks of the rich variety to build their own castles, to build their own kingdoms, instead of helping the more unfortunate. Of course, there are exceptions, such as the Bill Gates, etc. But if you look at the big picture, the one way to view it is you sort of have the materialistic science worldview, which we've talked about, where the world is viewed as external to us, and it's viewed as independent, it's foreign, it operates on its own power, there's no purpose or meaning in the universe. And then you overlay that with Orthodox religion, where you have a bunch of people praying to separate gods that's actually the same God, and they sort of put walls around themselves. I mean, they put walls up around themselves as if they have some kind of favored connection to the Almighty. So what happens is that these walls, and they develop militaries and to defend themselves from those who think differently. And we're spending all this time and money and effort defending these belief systems through walls and military weapons, as opposed to looking for the common element. And this is, it could be approached as a matter of religion or science, where it remains remarkable that the three major Abrahamic religions all pray to the same God, but they just don't get along. It's better, obviously, between the Jews and the Christians than it is with the Muslims. But we can't make progress unless we could at least agree upon some united common goals, such as feeding the hungry, sheltering the homeless, and giving everybody something productive to do. I mean, to me, the opportunity to have gainful employment is right up there. And an education, obviously. So why we don't hear more about that is a mystery to me, and I think it's a complete lack of leadership, and we have people leading the countries who have built their own kingdoms and don't care about the common good.
But when you come to the major religions, every major religion out there, and even the minor ones, even getting down to some that aren't major, but they're there. They all boil down to the golden rule.
Yeah,
At the foundation of every single one of them is the golden rule, and since the cornerstone, the very foundation stone of all of them is the same thing, why do we have to go beyond that? Why do we have to build up different whatevers around it? Why can't we just go back to the basic foundation, and recognize that there is that link, that there is that commonality that binds us all together as one family. I mean, we're called, the human race. It means all of us. It doesn't mean just some. We are a species we're Homo sapiens. That's all of us, not just some. And why can't people embrace that part of it? I mean, everybody's a little bit different and unique, thank heavens. But that means they bring different aspects and different wisdoms and different philosophies into the mix. But that doesn't separate us. It should unite us and make us richer. And,
although I have to say that I really, truly hope and believe that there is a last judgment of sorts. I hope that there is justice on the grander scale. Your point about the golden rule, I think, is great. I remember there's a book, and I had her on my show. I can't think of her name right now, but she had this passage in her book. It was something like, with regard to Benjamin Franklin, we don't put Benjamin Franklin up on a pedestal and pray to him. We use electricity.
Yeah.
Why do we put Jesus Christ on a pedestal and pray to him instead of living the golden rule? It doesn't make any sense. And it really is, it's the exact same thing that we have failed to sort of integrate that teaching, just like, we failed to integrate the golden rule into our lives, and most people have not integrated it. Number two, it's analogous to the fact that science has not integrated quantum theory into their worldview either. And I like to think that they're similar in a way because they both lead to a more spiritual world, both the golden rule and on different levels. And quantum theory, if we're going to carry it out consistently, lead to a united spiritual world. So ultimately, another way to put this is that when we take apart science, the materialistic edifice, and we knock it down, then what we have, I believe, is a spiritual world that rises in its place. So I'm with you on the golden rule, though. I think that's principle there.
Well, I think we've all come to it. There was a movie a long time ago called The Gods Must Be Crazy. Did you ever see it?
I don't remember that one.
Okay, so it in essence, a man is flying in an airplane across a piece of country that hasn't been touched by humanity or industry or anything, and he's having his lunch, and he's flying over this poor guy who's walking along, not knowing what an airplane is or anything, and the guy eats his lunch, and he drinks his Coke, and he throws the Coke bottle out of the window. It hits this native on the head. And he looks up and he sees there's something that he doesn't know what it is. And he worships the Coke bottle because it came from God. And I think, and they build up a whole religion on it and the whole thing. And I think that in many cases, that's exactly what we've done. We've taken people and we have worshipped them because of their philosophies. And instead of just taking the philosophies and applying them to life. And I believe that Jesus was an amazing teacher, an amazing man, and he had wonderful philosophies. But he was, after all, human. and so was Buddha, and so was Gandhi, and so was so that to create a religion around a person because of their philosophy is ridiculous. Take the wisdom,
Yes.
take the knowledge, and thank the guy, but don't make him a god. And
Yeah.
I believe as human beings, for some reason, we need a God that we can identify with, and okay, I understand that, but why can't you just understand that person was a channel through which universal consciousness came through that touched your heart, and thank him as a channel, but understand that the wisdom, the knowledge, the spirit, the philosophy came from a higher consciousness, not the person.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the messages there, and I had my brother-in-law, who is a minister in Tampa, great guy, and I had him on my show once, an early show, and it was something about, I asked crazy questions that you probably could figure out, but one of them was, okay, so if Jesus Christ comes again, hypothetically, what's going to happen? If the second coming of Jesus Christ is this grand event that is supposed to occur in forms of Christianity, and is he going to say something different? Isn't it more likely that he's going to say, "You guys didn't listen to me the first time. Do I need to tell you again?" Won't he say something like that? Or is he going to wave a magic wand and make everybody good people? I'm really it's very similar to what you were saying before about going to another planet without fixing our own planet. What do we expect to gain from going to another planet? Okay, I think it's really cool if there's life on other planets. There might be life on Mars. I think it's really cool. But what improvement are we going to see? Are we going to learn how to be better people? Are we going to learn that we should be, taking care of the homeless and the starving and education, all that? I mean, how is it? To me, it's a big distraction. Is where I'm going with this. But on the Jesus Christ realm, I really think that he came once. The message is there. It needs to be integrated into our lives. We need to move on. That is where I'm at with that, and it's unbelievable power. It's a whole other topic, but the power of the New Testament and of his life, because it's 2,000 years later, and he's still, probably the most powerful person ever to live.
Well, if you look at it, it really shouldn't be even, called Christianity. It should be called Paulism, because Paul really created the religion around Jesus. I think if Jesus came back, he'd have a bone to pick.
Yeah.
And frankly, why would he? Look what we did to him the first time.
Right.
I don't think I'd book
Right.
that trip a second time.
No, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. It's really not Christian. It's really from Paul. That's a point that people forget about, the history of it, and it's sort of there's a relationship between Orthodox religion and science, right? And this goes back to the point I was making earlier that we were talking about, which is that if you read the major scientists, Dawkins is a good example, Richard Dawkins, or at least Random, the ones that really dump on religion, they're always dumping on Orthodox religion. Their target is almost invariably the biblical literalist, the Orthodox folks that doesn't question the Bible. And that, to me, is a straw man. They haven't really gone toe-to-toe with, like, for example, my book, or something by Amika Swami, or Robert Lanza, or Rupert Sheldrake. In other words, a more modern approach to to viewing spirituality, there's no doubt that, as we said earlier, that quantum physics itself inspired mystics and inspired a more spiritual worldview, as evidenced by the Tao of physics, for example. Mm-hmm. So the point is that religion has really been a problem in a lot of ways, but in terms of sort of fixing people to set beliefs that are not questioned, and I look at religion the same way I look at science, which is open your mind, question the beliefs. If you're good with it, fine, but don't buy a soul. You have your own mind. I'm shocked that people, they say, okay, what am I supposed to believe in? And they take a book off the shelf. Okay, I'll believe in this. Or their parents tell them this is what you're supposed to do. Okay, so you've just given away your soul, your free choice, to some sort of orthodox belief system that really might have some truth in it, but you're not going to find it if you just accept it whole. So exactly.
And when you stop and think that we'll take the Bible is about 2,000, 2,500 years old, depending on which part of it you're looking at, it was appropriate for the time in which it was written. And the people that wrote it had not the frame of reference that we have today. So that while the basic fundamental truths are there, it's something that needs to be expanded for the time in which it serves. And if you are someone that is taking it verbatim, I mean, if that's the case, then you have to look at Moses coming down off the mountaintop with 613 laws, not 10, not. And that you're not supposed to wear cotton and rayon together because that's a sin. And in those laws, it tells you how much you can sell your daughter for. So, I mean, if that's the case, and we're literalists, whole bunches of people are going to be putting their daughters up for sale.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I have a little article that was published in Quest magazine. It's called Does God Evolve? And I really think that the mind evolves, and the mind is in a constant state of trying to understand itself. Mm-hmm. And so 2,000 years ago, the Bible is a reflection of the mind trying to understand itself. But to take those words as being true for all time, sort of, to me, assumes that God itself does not evolve. And if we define God as the cosmic mind, which is what I would do, then that is a contradiction, or that is giving short shrift or disrespecting the mind, because it's like saying the mind of God itself will never learn. And that to me does not make any sense. And so the Bible and the Quran is almost a better example, because the Quran was channeled to Muhammad and is viewed as being the word of God, but that was also, to me, channeled during a time when the mind of God was still understanding it, trying to understand itself. And so to say that is true for all time, and therefore that the messages of the language in the Quran need to be carved in the stone for all time, is really, how can I put this? It's really limiting. It's inaccurate, and it ultimately is another prison. It's a spiritual prison.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it really it blows me away. I spoke with another lawyer, actually, who happened to be a fundamentalist Christian, and said that that once the Bible was written, there would be no more inspirational writings coming from God. And I questioned him and said, "Are you crazy? What makes you think that God can't speak through me or through you? What's wrong? Hey, I would think that God is constantly giving inspiration to people who have a talent and a gift with words, and they're putting down wonderful, insightful material for people to search and find. And what's right for one person is not right for another, because we're on this wonderful trip of consciousness rising and growing and all of that. Everybody's at a different place, so that there is material that is right for them today, and tomorrow it will be a stepping stone, but there's something else. And our purpose, in my opinion, is to constantly be finding those stepping stones and stepping more and more and more further into an understanding of the totality of who we are and what we are and where we're going to go. And I wrote something not too long ago that we're all on a journey, and a spiritual journey. We're spirits on a spiritual journey, and that we aren't really striving to reconnect with Source, or we're striving to become Source. So, it's sort of like we're growing, and we're supposed to keep learning. And it's funny because even when you see people that don't appear to be spiritual or on a spirit, we're all on that spiritual journey. We're all on it. And you can't judge another person, because what they need might not be what you need, but we're all gathering and we're all learning and we're all growing. And I think we need to honor everybody's journey. We can't say, I don't see you manifesting this, so therefore you're not as spiritual as you think you are, because it could be the very opposite. It's you can't judge another. You just can't. If somebody commits murder, you can judge them, but as far as the spirit goes, as far as our consciousness goes, we can't sit in judgment of other people, because we don't have the clarity of vision to understand where they're coming from and who they are. And maybe that's part of the journey.
Well, there is a, and I don't think you're saying this, but to me there is a moralistic norm that does circle around the golden rule, that I do think forms a model of conduct. But I want to say two things to what you just said with regard to somebody who thinks that God spoke once and it's all done. I completely agree with you that my first question would be, how do you know that?
Yeah,
are you
told
now,
me.
are you now? Is this person now the Word of God? Are they pronouncing that God spoke once but never again? Because if that's the case, then this person knows more than the authors of the Bible. It just doesn't make any sense. And plus the fact there are all sorts of books out there, such as Conversations with God and Chandler, and works of inspiration that show a connection to the source. And whether you want to believe them all or not is up to the reader. But when you compile all of those books, which would take up a small library, there are people and there are messages throughout time where somebody does have that connection, which I happen to think is a deep source of inspiration. But to me, it is constant. We have a constant connection to the source. It's just that back in the day, 2,000 years ago, it was closer. It wasn't as odd. We haven't been, they weren't, people back then were not conditioned to think this is all weird. There were magic and the enchantments and
if you take it back, if you go back, I don't know, 10, 20,000 years to when we were hunter-gatherers, when we were just small communities, I do believe that those people were more in touch with their connection to the Great Spirit, the universal consciousness, whatever you want to call it. They were more in touch and in harmony with nature and with spirit and with each other than we are today.
Right. And look at what we did, what we've done. It's sort of what I said about you. We've looked at that nature and we've categorized it as a machine, and we pretend it as if it's a foreign object. That's what's happened. We have pretended if it's a foreign object instead of recognizing our connection, our oneness with nature. It's exactly this. It's very analogous to propping Jesus Christ up on a cross or on a statue and praying to him. We instead of integrating his teachings into our lives, we put it outside and pray to it and therefore diminish the power of the message. So I think that's important. The second thing is that I've made a decision quite a while ago, maybe 20, 30 years ago, that it's better to be eternally optimistic and open-minded, just in case all this stuff is true, than it is to talk yourself out of it. And one of the so I actually think it's a healthy frame of mind. It's also known as the can-do attitude. It's like not anything very original. The can-do attitude. There's no mountain high enough. There's no mountain too high. When my daughter went to college, I told her something I just read about how one of the regrets of some of the most successful people. I just read this, that they didn't dream big enough. They didn't dream big enough, which I think is powerful. Even the success, they did not. So dream big, and you never know what might happen. As you used the term imprison earlier, which is exactly right. We imprison ourselves with self-doubts, with beliefs. Oh yeah. Question assumptions.
Well, that's why things like faith healing work, because we have faith in this person to heal us. And I've had the good fortune to be able to experience a lot of this stuff. And I've been in congregations that were very fundamentalist, where there was the singing and there was the clapping and there was the speaking in tongues, and then there was the healer who would touch you and people would go down. And it's amazing. You believe somebody can do something, and it happens, and you don't realize that you can do the same thing. And you give someone else the power. And I think we're at a point in time where we are taking back that power into ourselves. Now most people aren't quite to the point where they're healing, cancers and stuff like that. Not everybody, but some people do. And it's an element of faith. It's an element of believing. It's an element of believing you are connected to that source, and that source can channel energy into you, and you are capable of almost anything. And I can walk on water, but it has to be frozen. And I can levitate, but you need to scare the heck out of me in order for that to happen. So I know it's possible, and it's just a matter of getting yourself. It's work, and I think most people just think it just comes automatically, and it doesn't. It is work. It's like everything else. You work at making that connection. You work at understanding that part of yourself. You work at opening yourself up to that and connecting to that consciousness, and over time it happens. And when that happens, it changes your world from black and white to technicolor and to a vibrancy that you will never lose. And it's amazing. That's really well put. And I think, one of the if there's going to be a couple phenomena that sort of overturn this materialistic worldview, one of them is going to be the placebo effect, because science really doesn't have an explanation for the placebo effect. And when you go down and they're trying to, I think they're going to semantically sort of incorporate it into science. But when you go to the original articles on the placebo effect, and they're in my book, there was one quote from, I think it's Beckman, who wrote the article or something like that. But basically, he says,
the mystery of how strong belief heals. Strong belief heals, because the person taking that placebo, that fake pill, believes that it's going to work. So how is it possible that that belief itself, which is an internal generated emotion, how can that affect the physical body? And the answer is there's one way for it. If the physical body is connected to the mind, if they're the same thing,
well, it went even further too, didn't it? If the doctor believes it too,
right,
it was even stronger.
Right, you're exactly right, and that gets into that group belief system where you're talking about the faith healing session that you attended. If the critical mass grows and deepens its belief, the effect seems to be more powerful. And to me, it sounds to me like a mathematical formula, which is the deeper, more widespread the belief, the more chances it's going to have an impact. And I think it's incredibly promising. But we need to move it from the as you said, the woo-woo or the New Age quackery realm into the mainstream. This is what I am all about, because a lot of these things that are out there, and channeling, mediumship, the paranormal, it's like a sideshow to a circus. There is what's going on in the tent, which is medical science, the Big Bang Theory, and politics, and then there are these little sideshows around that are practicing these witchcraft and strange arts. We need to incorporate the truth of the paranormal, of parapsychology phenomena into the tent. That's where I'm at. I'm not happy with this two worlds approach. It makes me a little bit unique on that front. But I think the true power of these supernatural occurrences will be better felt when it's indoctrinated, when it's part of our normal life, as opposed to being some kind of outlier, some kind of strange thing that's occurring out here that we've got to pretend that it doesn't exist and we can't talk about it in public and it's not on TV and all this. So
well, I'm also an ordained minister, and in the spiritual tradition, and I asked another minister once, because in most spiritual churches they do the platform mediumship at the end of the service, and I said, why do you do that? Well, I mean, first of all, spirituality is the spiritualist church is a philosophy. It's not really a religious organization, though it is now, kind of. But I said, why do you do the platform mediumship? Why do you pull this carnival act into a service? And he said, we're the only church that does it, and it attracts people in so they hear the message. And I said, but you're not giving them a message.
Yeah.
What's the point? I mean, if you're gonna have a shtick, have a message to give too. But my objective. I mean, I've done mediumship and I've done the platform and I've done psychic work and I've done a whole bunch of that stuff. But I came to the point where I realized that the message I was trying to give across wasn't being heard in that modality. So I just switched. I went over to interviewing amazing people like you, and I don't do that stuff anymore because there was a spiritual message in it. Every time I gave a message to someone, there was something spiritual woven into it. Hopefully they would hear that, or even if it was subliminally, it would be seated and it would be there, and they could pull on it when they needed to. But for the most part, for this huge spectrum of people out there that do that work, there's no spiritual background, there's no spiritual foundation, and they're not giving a message of spirit. And that's my objection to that. That's why I don't put myself in that category at all. I'm a student. I share as I learn, and I learn as I share. But it's not psychic. It's me connecting to a part of me that is wiser and better than the physical part. I'm working at combining them, but it's a lifetime's journey.
No, I think that's really well put. I think you hit another nail on the head, which is that if you don't connect it to meaning, it appears as if it's a carnival act. That's exactly right, and sort of it gives grist to the hardened materialistic scientists to say, look how silly this is. I mean, if you read The God Delusion by Dawkins or God is Not Great by Christopher Hitchens, they pick up on all that stuff and they make those of us in this field look silly because they're following Bigfoot or the world was created in 6,000 years, or that the blood of the Virgin Mary was on the statue, or something so just really bizarre to sort of color the adversary. And my last guest on my show, I don't know if you've had him, but Paul Selleck, who's a channeler. I called him the reluctant channeler, but he clearly has some connection to the spirit, the source, the guides, or whatever. He channels these books verbatim, has published, I think, 3 or 4 of them. But I like to say, okay, look at the words, but also ask the question. Let's assume this is true. How is it possible? Just like with work as a psychic. Let's assume it's true. For once, don't doubt it. Try to explain it. And we had and the answer to him was, there's truth, and what it tells me is that you have a connection to the source, or to the God mind, or the conscious mind, whatever you want to call it. And so it's really not all that strange if we live in a mind-centered world. If we stop pretending that it's only matter and matter in motion, that we're just living in this mechanical contraption. So it makes perfect sense that he has the skill, other people have it, and so there it is. Read the words and open your mind.
Well, everybody has it. Everybody has, at one point in time or another, been inspired or sat down and been writing something and have it flow so beautifully that it's amazing, and it's like, holy crap, did I write that? And that's, everybody has the capacity to do it. That's what bothers me so greatly. Everyone has the capacity, and they don't trust themselves enough to allow it to happen.
Yeah, yes, because they talk themselves out of it. They talk themselves out of it, or they think it's all a bunch of silliness, and it's not worth, or it's not going to make them popular at a cocktail party. But I think it's also true that it's sort of, and I'd like to see what you think about this, but it's sort of like we all have these spiritual or wild thoughts in the closet or in the back of our minds. We just don't talk about it. But when you start talking about it, it's amazing how many people have had the same thoughts. It's amazing to me. How many? When I bring it up, and I'll never forget, I had Bernard Carr on my show a couple of years ago, who wrote this book called Multiverse or Universe, and he has 2 lives. He's a traditional scientist, but then he also has, when I opened up a little with him about how does he explain the moving picture? How does science explain the moving flow of reality? Because that's one of the questions we have to get into spirituality and consciousness for that. So it really is true, and a lot of this, I think, Barbara, is coming out of the closet. It's not being afraid to talk about it and having intelligent conversations instead of being shouted down as being some kind of crazy person because you believe, because you levitated or because you had an out-of-body experience or you hallucinated or something. Believing that these things are true or can be true is much more healthy, is where I'm going with this. So.
Oh, yeah, and it doesn't make you. Well, see, the thing is, I think everybody is supposed to be different and unique. And when you try to be like everybody else, you deny the magic that you have inside.
Yeah.
And the universe would not be complete if all of us weren't here. I mean, even the creeps. So, there's something to be learned from everybody. And, this science is important. I mean, it actually has done some good stuff, but because it was an either or my way or the highway type stuff, as far as education goes. I mean, to me, the educational system should be reworked totally, because I'm horrified by what we're teaching our children or not teaching them, and it's so antiquated. And you have your textbook people who don't want to rewrite their text to really put the honest stuff out there, and so we are teaching our children history that is that's not true. The history of this country is what we're in the history books are so not true to what the actual history of this country is. The North American continent was not, just populated by a few wandering bands of these poor little Indians that didn't know any better. I mean, the copper and the copper mines in Minnesota and Michigan have been they have been mined for the last 9,000 years. There are Roman forts, or the foundations of Roman forts, up and down Mississippi and the Wabash. I mean, this country is rich with history, and we're not teaching our kids. So I think there is a shift here that science has helped us to determine so much as far as the age of things and the archaeological stuff and the DNA from how old skeletons are and all of that stuff and electric lights and telephones and all of that too. But science has a place to play in this world, but so does nature and so does the spirit. And when we get the two or three of them together, then we will have a society that hopefully will not have hungry people or homeless people or wars. I mean, there doesn't have to be war either.
Yeah. Well, I think that the educational system probably starts it all, and I too am shocked by the curriculum in virtually every school on the topics of religion and science. And with regard to American history, I think you have another one there. And it's if we can't change the curriculum, this is going to be a long haul, because you sort of have to work from the back and go forward, because when books are put into curriculum, when there are textbooks written, like on religion or science, then that is interpreted as gospel truth or something really close to. And it takes years and years for someone like me to say, oh, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's look at the alternative perspective. And it's really a problem. Completely agree with you.
Don't you think, though, that the real responsibility for the education of the children are the parents?
Well, but the problem though is to what degree can the parents control the curriculum?
Well, they can enhance it.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I agree. I mean, I think that there should be, like, for example, I mean, comparative religion is a big one for me. I mean, there's hardly anything. I think all high school kids should be taught comparative religion to get different perspectives and to compare them in an objective way. You can't teach religion in school, but you can teach comparative religion, I believe, at least in college. But to say that you can't teach comparative religion is really doing an injustice, because I think that by not teaching that, we ingrain people in the us and them attitude. I was raised a Christian, I was raised Catholic, and therefore the Jews are like this or the Muslims are like this, instead of actually understanding where these religions come from. And the same thing for the Eastern religions. I think the Eastern religions are fascinating.
They are.
Hindu, they're fascinating, and Confucianism, for that matter. I mean, it's whether that's a religion or not, it's still a fascinating topic that I would put in the high school religions as being, call it something else, cultural comparative,
But look at the colleges. They put you the first year you have to take core courses that basically give you high school stuff because high school didn't give it to you. And even colleges are so restrictive as to what they're teaching that again, that element of nobody's taught to think.
Yeah.
And it costs so much money. Well, you've had a daughter in college. My son happily is all through with all of that, but it's scary because they don't have the concept that anything is possible.
Yeah.
And they don't question.
Well, I think what we're talking about here is something very simple, and that's the way I look at it, which is that we need an open mind, which is the student, and then we need to expose the open mind to the world of ideas, and let the open mind critique, analyze, consider these different ideas. It's very simple. And there are some schools. I mean, I went to Beloit College in Wisconsin, which was and still is a very independent-minded school. And the courses I took my first semester have had a lifelong effect on me, because they were those kind of open-minded classes. And so it's not impossible. It's just that that kind of education is not valued. Right? I mean, in my opinion, parents think their kids need to go to school to make money, to get a job. And when they get out, it's become more and more prevalent. But I really think, I completely agree, it all begins with an open mind. It all begins with that.
And when you look at children from infancy, they are molded to accept what parents say, what teachers say, what ministers and priests say. They're these are the authority figures. These are the ones that set your parameters. These are the ones that restrict you and give you the rules and the laws. And you become ingrained in apathy almost, because you don't, if it's not in the book, then forget it. Don't question it. This is what the book says. And so that we dumb down our children almost from the very beginning.
Yeah.
No,
you're exactly right. But then over time, people do. I think generally speaking, there is a movement that have organically to be independent, to think for yourself. But that needs to be encouraged, I think. And the only way to get to a more universal mindset is to give the mind the freedom to think for itself, to criticize other ideas, and to be exposed to the world of ideas. When it irks me, I mean, it's in my book somewhere where, we tend to take our fundamental beliefs off the shelf. It's like, what is your fundamental belief? Well, I believe Darwin, and I believe Einstein, and I believe the Bible. Is there any other questions? No, because those are the leading authorities, and whatever they say must be true. That is really a summary, to me, of science. We don't even, we don't question the big guys because we think they must be true. They must be right for all time. And that is a big, big problem. They might, I always say, maybe they are right, and I have to have a lot of respect for Einstein as a humanitarian, but if they're right, then their ideas should stand up to questioning. It's not that we should just take it at face value. I mean, he was the one that questioned quantum theory, that never believed in quantum theory, that also believes that there's a real world independent of human perception, which is wrong. But most of the leading scientists they're still Einsteinians at heart, which is where I think we have a problem. Now, it's a whole other topic, but it's in my book. But the point being that the power, the authority of some of these figures, and Darwin and Einstein are the two big ones, it's so overwhelming that nobody in the orthodox world, in the universities, question them, or they question them with great trepidation. Einstein's questioned more than Darwin, but Darwin his ideas have superficial appeal, but when you get into it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So
no, it doesn't. But don't you wonder if, like Jesus, if they came back and saw what we had done with their ideas, don't you think they'd be a little bit horrified too?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that there's a quote from Einstein along the same lines. As he got older, he had some comment exactly saying that, which is that they propped up his ideas into some kind of, religious stature, when he was just trying to come up with ideas on the back of an envelope.
Well,
I mean, we have a tendency to.
No, I put my website is full of my ideas, my philosophies, and whatever. And I would hope that people would build on them and go beyond them instead of keeping them where they are. My thought, my hope, my prayer is that it may make some of the things I say may make sense to, but I would hope they would build on them, add their own wisdom to them, and make them even greater. I would be horrified if my stuff was just kept as it is, and people think that that's the end all, because it's not. It's only the beginning of the beginning.
Right. And it's remarkable to me how much time people spend on mundane tasks, such as picking out a cell phone, or picking out a computer, or buying a car, or picking out a shampoo, as opposed to their fundamental beliefs. It just amazes me, and we have to get past that. We have to sort of encourage people to question the big ideas, to face them at least once in their life. What Socrates said, that the unquestioned life is not worth living, or something like that. And that's, to me, so fundamentally important. I'm optimistic. I think that overall, young people do have their own search for meaning, and I do think that the millennial generation is going beyond the checkbook a little bit more, and that they'll open their minds to broader vistas and not be just fed facts and truths. But if it doesn't happen now, then it's going to happen in the next generation. If not that, I mean, I do think we're on this evolutionary cycle, Barbara, where we are waiting for a generation to take control, to open their minds
no, I totally agree. I do think that this generation or the next or the next or the next, the pendulum is swinging in that direction. And I just hope that it comes to a balance, incorporating the two, that we don't go to the extremes, so that in 400 or 500 years we are so spiritually oriented that science doesn't have a play within our life, because it really has to be a balance. It can't be one or the other. It has to be incorporated together in order for us to step into the next stage of evolution.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that ultimately the quest of science is to master the world, to master the physical world. And do that unless you start off with the right mindset, the right metaphysics, the right worldview, which I believe is mind or consciousness centered. But once that occurs, and I'm confident will occur, then science performs the function of making the world better for everybody, such as producing more food out of a given acre of land, such as building cheaper homes, such as having more efficient ways to deliver education, making education more available, and the same thing with jobs. I mean, that I think is where science has to get out of the metaphysical religious world. They have to get out of trying to explain creation. That they need to get into. They need to get into how do we make the world a better place for everybody. So that's maybe not what some scientists want to hear, but I think that that's the true value of science. More like a doctor. A doctor's goal is to make the patient better. Well, the science's goal should make the world better. So I think.
Well, they have discovered the God particle. They should stop while they're ahead.
Yeah. Don't get me started on the God.
I find it fascinating that they really don't want to claim that there is a God, so to speak, but they did discover a God particle. We're real close. We're real close to the end here, so I do want to also put out that you can be found at the Collapse of the Big. That's the name of the book. At collapseofmaterialism.com. I'll say it again, www.thecollapseofmaterialism.com. And your podcast, when you do it, is www.webtalkradio.net. And the name of the show is Conversations Beyond Science and Religion. I want to thank you so very much for being here today and adjusting your time to mine so that we could do this show. And I so appreciate the fact that we have such synchronistic thought.
It's been a lot. It's been a lot of fun, Barbara. Thank you so much for your time and for inviting me on the show. And it's always a pleasure to speak to somebody who may be coming at things from a somewhat different perspective, but sort of winds up in a similar spot. So that's always encouraging.
Well, I think it's always. I think that's what life is supposed to be. That you may think that there's a difference, and yet you end up with, well, we're synchronistic here, and we're synchronistic here, and we're synchronistic here. Isn't that interesting? Maybe we should investigate some of the other stuff. So I do want to thank you so much. I'm hopeful that I know somebody in the chat room has already ordered your book, so at least you got a one sale out of it, and it's I hope we can do this again sometime so that we can kind of expand on where we've gone.
Well, Barbara, thank you very much. It will always be a pleasure. I'll have to have you on my show soon, and thank you for your time. It's been a great conversation. I appreciate it. Absolutely. Thanks again, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm used to saying good night. But thank you, everybody who listens and who has listened. This will go up on YouTube and be available in all sorts of other places as well. Thank you for joining with us today and sharing our time. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.